I stepped through the side door of Kristen's house, my brother's inheritance papers still in my briefcase, and heard my daughter laughing in the kitchen. Then Derek's voice, my daughter's husband, low and eager. He won't even know what hit him. By the time the evaluation gets filed, we'll control everything. The pension, the inheritance, all of it. My hand tightened on the doorframe. 32 years in fraud investigation, and now my own daughter was working a con on me. Please subscribe and share where in the world you're watching from right now. Your support keeps these stories coming. My name is Chester Fairbanks. I'm 58 years old, and I spent 32 years as a senior claims investigator for Southwestern Mutual Insurance. For 3 decades, families hired attorneys to fight me in courtrooms across Arizona. Prosecutors borrowed my case files to build their indictments. The FBI's Phoenix field office kept my direct line on a sticky note above someone's desk. I was the man you called when the fraud was layered, when the paperwork looked clean, when loving families were stripping their elderly relatives down to the bone while smiling for the neighbors. Now I was living in my daughter's converted garage, and she was running a textbook guardianship scheme against me. The irony would have been funny if I hadn't spent 3 decades watching families do exactly this. I walked to my garage, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my camp bed. My pulse had steadied. I cataloged what I'd heard and filed it in the mental folder I'd been keeping for 18 months without fully admitting why. 400 square feet. Concrete floor under a threadbare area rug. Janet and I bought at a flea market in 1994. Exposed wooden rafters that collected dust I could see floating in the single beam of light from the window that looked directly into Kristen's kitchen. My life organized into clear plastic bins stacked against the wall, each one labeled in Janet's handwriting because she'd helped me pack when I sold our house. 31 years of marriage, reduced to containers. I reached under my shirt and touched the ring hanging from its chain. Janet's wedding ring, quarter-carat diamond in white gold, modest because we'd been young and broke, and she'd insisted the size of the stone had nothing to do with the size of the love. She'd been right. I kept the ring hidden. Kristen had never asked about it, never wondered what happened to her mother's jewelry. Too busy inventorying what she could claim for herself. The camp bed creaked as I shifted my weight. Portable space heater humming in the corner, struggling against the December chill that seeped through the sealed garage door. Motor oil smell that never faded, no matter how many times I scrubbed the floor. This was my world now. This was what helping family had gotten me. I closed my eyes and let myself remember what things had looked like 2 years ago. Janet and I had a 4-bedroom house in Tempe. Nothing fancy, but ours. Paid off the mortgage in 2018, the year I turned 56. I remember standing in the kitchen that night, Janet pressing a glass of champagne into my hand, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of a promise kept. "We're free," she'd said. "Whatever happens now, no one can take this from us." 6 months later, the doctor said ovarian cancer. Stage 3. The treatments cost $340,000 over 14 months. We burned through savings, liquidated retirement accounts, took out a home equity line we swore we'd never need. Janet died on a Tuesday in March, 3:17 in the afternoon. I was holding her hand when her breathing stopped. She weighed 89 pounds at the end. 1:42, the day of her diagnosis. After the funeral, I sold the house for $485,000. $200,000 went to settle the remaining medical debt. The collection agencies didn't care that I'd just buried my wife. They cared about their margins. Another $150,000 went to Kristen. She'd called me crying 6 weeks after Janet's funeral. "Dad, we're going to lose the house. Derek made some bad investments. Please, I don't know what else to do." I wrote the check because that's what Janet would have expected. Family takes care of family. That was the value system we'd raised our daughter with. That was supposed to mean something. Kristen offered the converted garage as a temporary solution while I figured out my next move. "Dad, you shouldn't be alone right now. Let us take care of you for a while." Temporary. That word echoed in my head now, bitter as bile. I'd been here 15 months. The garage door had been sealed, but not insulated. I ate meals delivered on plastic trays, rarely invited to the family table anymore. My car had developed mysterious mechanical problems that Derek helpfully diagnosed as too expensive to fix. My cell phone plan got accidentally downgraded, limiting my data and my connection to the outside world. Small things, easy to dismiss individually, harder to ignore when you lined them up in sequence. I opened my eyes and looked at my woodworking bench in the corner. The nautical puzzle box I'd been building sat there, brass fittings gleaming dully in the weak light. 18 moves in precise sequence to reveal the hidden compartment. Janet's birthday, 6 digits. Our anniversary, 6 more. The day we closed on our first house together, 6 final turns. I'd designed it around numbers Janet and I shared, dates that meant nothing to anyone except me. I started building puzzle boxes during her chemotherapy, something for her hands to work while she couldn't sleep, something to show her that beauty could still be created even while her body was being destroyed. She solved every one I made her. Even at the end, when the morphine clouded everything else, her fingers remembered the sequences. I'd never been able to give one away since she died. Maybe I'd need this one for something else now. The briefcase sat on my bed where I'd dropped it when I walked in. Inside, the documents from Leland's attorney waited. $12 million in mineral rights, property, and liquid assets. My brother's apology from beyond the grave. 20 years we didn't speak. 20 years of stubborn silence over $80,000 from our father's estate. The argument itself had faded in my memory, but the pride that sustained it never had. Neither of us could bend. Neither of us would call. I'd thought about it every Christmas, every birthday, every time something reminded me of the brother who'd taught me to fish, who'd let me tag along with his friends when I was too young to be cool, who'd stood as my best man at a wedding where we both cried like children. Then his attorney's letter arrived. Heart attack. Sudden. He'd been dead 3 days before anyone found him. I flew to Durango for the funeral. Sat in the back of a church filled with his colleagues from the mining company, people who talked about his generosity, his sharp mind, his loneliness that he'd never admit. A woman named Margaret said he'd kept a photo of us on his desk. 2 boys fishing at a lake, grinning at the camera. I didn't remember the photo being taken. The handwritten letter was enclosed with the will. Chester, it started. You were right about Dad. I was too stubborn to say so. The only family that mattered was the one I was too proud to call. The rest of the letter described 20 years of regret. 20 years of reaching for the phone and putting it back down. 20 years of building wealth that meant nothing because there was no one to share it with. He'd never married, never had children, never let anyone close enough to matter. I'm leaving everything to you, the letter finished, not because you need it, but because you're the only person I ever loved who might remember me kindly. Please try to. I'm sorry, Chester, for all the wasted years. I'd read it on the plane home. Read it again in the taxi from the airport. Read it a 3rd time sitting on my camp bed in the garage that night, Janet's ring cold against my chest. $12 million felt less like a gift than an accusation, and now my daughter wanted to take it from me. I stood up and walked to the small window. Through it, I could see the kitchen clearly. Kristen and Derek had moved to the living room, their voices too distant to hear. The manila folder they'd been reviewing was gone from the counter. 15 months of small indignities lined up into a pattern I should have recognized sooner. The questions asked twice in front of neighbors. Dad, did you take your medication? Dad, what day is it? Sighing dramatically when my answers varied, because she kept changing which answer she wanted. The HOA president, invited for coffee, the same week Kristen moved my reading glasses while I was walking, then staged my confusion when I couldn't find them. The mail that started disappearing. Birthday cards from former colleagues at Southwestern Mutual. My pension statements. Correspondence from Leland's estate attorney that I'd had to request duplicates of because the originals never arrived. The financial arrangements that seemed generous at the time. Adding Kristen to my checking account for emergencies. Small withdrawals that grew larger. The pension direct deposit rerouted to a joint account she controlled. I'd calculated it last month during a sleepless night when the space heater died and I lay shivering under 3 blankets. $67,000 extracted through manipulation and manufactured consent. Derek's day trading losses explained the desperation. I'd overheard enough fragments to piece together the scope. 217,000 in the hole. Credit cards maxed. The mortgage on this house 2 months past due. My pension looked like a lifeline to them. $60,000 a year, guaranteed for life. Leland's inheritance changed the math completely. The voices in the living room rose briefly. Kristen's laugh, sharp and satisfied. Derek saying something I couldn't make out. I turned away from the window. 32 years I spent catching people exactly like them. Families who convinced themselves that love justified theft. That blood ties made exploitation acceptable, that their desperation exempted them from the rules everyone else had to follow. I knew the playbook, the isolation tactics, the manufactured evidence, the corrupt professionals who provided cover for cash. I dismantled dozens of these schemes, testified in courts across 3 states, helped send people to prison for doing exactly what my daughter was doing to me. The difference was, those had been strangers. Names in files, faces across deposition tables. This was Kristen, the girl who'd asked me to check under her bed for monsters. The teenager who'd cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart. The woman who'd held Janet's hand in the hospital and promised me we'd get through this together. I sat back down on the camp bed. Derek's words broke something inside me. Not anger, something older, colder. The investigator's instinct, dormant for 2 years of grief, stirring awake. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out Leland's letter. Read the final lines again. I'm sorry, Chester, for all the wasted years. 20 years we'd lost to pride. And now, standing at another crossroads, I had a choice. I could confront Kristen, demand explanations, give her the chance to lie to my face and watch my reaction. Or I could do what I'd been trained to do. Document, verify, build a case so complete that no judge would question my competence. My daughter had made her move. She thought I was a confused old man, weakened by grief, isolated from anyone who might help. She'd forgotten what I did for a living. I opened my laptop and logged into the bank account. Kristen didn't know I had. The one I'd opened 6 months ago when the pattern first became impossible to ignore. Small deposits diverted from speaking fees and consulting work. Enough to hire an attorney when the time came. The time had come. I pulled up my contacts and found Sandra Vance's number. Sandra Vance, elder law attorney. 15 years working fraud cases together. She'd know exactly what I needed to do. I'd call her first thing in the morning. Tonight, I needed to think. I set the laptop aside and looked at the puzzle box on my workbench. 18 moves to open. Janet's birthday. Our anniversary. The day we closed on our first house together. I'd need to add another sequence. Something to protect whatever evidence I gathered. Leland's middle name was Francis. Our mother's maiden name. A family secret hidden in wood and brass. My daughter had searched this garage once, 3 months ago. Looking for something, probably the inheritance documents. She'd dismissed the puzzle box as Dad's little craft project. Never gave it a second glance. She didn't know what I could hide inside. I picked up the box and ran my fingers along its edges. The wood was smooth, the joints invisible. Janet had loved the craftsmanship, said it was proof that my hands could create beauty, not just tear apart lies. I'd build this one for a different purpose. The clock on my phone showed 11:47. Kristen and Derek's bedroom light went dark 20 minutes ago. The house was silent. I set the puzzle box down and lay back on my camp bed. 3 decades catching fraudsters. And I'd never seen this coming. But I saw it now, clearly. Every move they'd made, every incident they'd staged, every dollar they'd taken. My daughter thought I was already defeated. She didn't know me at all. The pattern became impossible to ignore 2 days after Leland's funeral. Kristen invited Patricia Hendricks, the HOA board secretary, for coffee. I walked through the kitchen on my way to the garage, and Kristen's voice shifted into that pitch she used when performing for an audience. "Dad, what day is it?" I glanced at the calendar on the wall. "Thursday." "Are you sure?" She tilted her head, concerned daughter mask firmly in place. "You said Wednesday this morning." I hadn't said anything about the day this morning. We hadn't spoken at all. Patricia's eyes tracked between us, cataloging. Kristen sighed. "He gets confused sometimes. The grief, you know." I kept walking, said nothing, but I filed the interaction in my mental case folder, noting Patricia's name, her position, the date, and approximate time. That was the first staged incident I consciously registered. Looking back, I suspect there were dozens before it that I'd attributed to stress or Kristen's impatience. The difference was, now I was watching. The pattern accelerated over the following weeks. Kristen developed a habit of asking the same question multiple times in front of witnesses, then varying which answer she wanted. She'd ask if I'd taken my blood pressure medication, and when I said yes, she'd frown and say, "I'd told her no an hour ago." She'd ask where I put my reading glasses, wait until I found them on my nightstand, then mention to Derek within my hearing that I'd been looking for them all morning, even though they were right where I always kept them. The glasses trick worked better for her after she started moving them. Looking back, I caught her at it 6 weeks in. Watched through the window as she lifted my glasses from the workbench where I'd set them while adjusting the puzzle box mechanism. She carried them to the kitchen counter, positioned them behind the coffee maker where they'd be hard to spot, then walked out to the backyard where Terrence Odom, the retired mail carrier from next door, was trimming his hedges. An hour later, she brought Terrence in for lemonade. "Dad, have you seen your glasses?" "You've been looking for them all day." I hadn't been looking for them at all. I knew exactly where I'd left them. "Behind the coffee maker," I said, without moving. Kristen's smile flickered. "What?" I walked to the kitchen, reached behind the coffee maker, and pulled out my glasses. "Right where you put them." Terrence's eyes narrowed, just for a moment. Then he looked away, sipping his lemonade, the retired mail carrier's instinct for other people's business fully engaged. Kristen recovered quickly, laughed it off. "Oh, Dad, I was looking for those everywhere for you. Glad you found them." But I saw the way she watched me for the rest of that afternoon. Recalculating. The isolation tactics intensified in parallel with the staged incidents. My cell phone plan got downgraded first. Kristen mentioned it casually over one of the plastic tray dinners delivered to my garage. "There was a billing issue, Dad. I had to switch you to a more basic plan. Hope that's okay." The basic plan meant 2 gigabytes of data per month. Enough to check email if I was careful. Not enough to research anything substantial, to maintain contact with former colleagues, to stay connected to the world beyond these 400 square feet. My car developed problems next. Derek played concerned son-in-law, poking under the hood with the confidence of a man who'd learned automotive terms from YouTube videos. Transmissions shot. Hops. Looking at 6, maybe 7,000 to fix. Not worth it on a car this age. The car was 9 years old. I'd had it serviced at the Honda dealership every 6 months for the entire time I owned it. The transmission had been fine 3 months ago. "I'd like to get a second opinion," I said. Derek shook his head. "Don't waste your money. Trust me on this one." The car sat in the driveway for 2 weeks, undrivable, until Derek had it towed to a junkyard for scrap value. $400 deposited into the joint account Kristen controlled. I never saw any documentation of the supposed transmission failure. Never spoke to a mechanic. Never got that second opinion. The meals shifted location around the same time. For the first 3 months after I moved in, I ate with Kristen and Derek at the dining table. Not comfortable exactly, but present. Part of the household. Then the trays started appearing. "You seem tired, Dad. Why don't you eat in your room tonight? I'll bring it to you." The room, not the guest suite she'd promised. Not the temporary family arrangement. My room, like a child or an invalid, 400 square feet of garage space where I could be contained. I ate alone after that. Plastic trays delivered through a door that opened into the house, but felt increasingly like an airlock. Mail became the next target. I'd been expecting correspondence from Leland's estate attorney about the mineral rights transfer. Documents that needed my signature. Timeline updates. Tax implications. The letters never arrived. When I called the attorney's office, his paralegal confirmed they'd sent 3 separate mailings to my address. All certified, all requiring signature, none of which I'd ever seen. I requested duplicate copies be sent to Sandra Vance's office instead. Told the paralegal there'd been some irregularities with my mail service at my current residence. She didn't ask questions, probably dealt with this kind of thing regularly. Elderly clients whose correspondence vanished before they could read it. The financial extraction ran on a separate track, just as systematic. Adding Kristen to my checking account had seemed practical at the time. She'd framed it as a safeguard. "What if something happens to you, Dad? What if you fall or get sick? I need to be able to access funds for emergencies." The emergencies started small. 200 here for groceries. 300 there for household supplies. 500 for a plumber who never came. I tracked every withdrawal in a ledger I kept hidden in my puzzle box materials. Kristen never showed interest in the sawdust and wood shavings on my workbench. Never noticed the notebook tucked between sheets of sandpaper. The amounts grew. Derek's voice carried through the thin wall between my garage and their kitchen one night 3 months into my residence. "Just ask him for the loan. He can afford it. He's not using that money anyway." "I can't just ask," Kristen said. "He'll want to know what it's for." "Make something up. Tell him it's for your real estate license renewal." The next morning, Kristen knocked on my door with tears in her eyes. "Dad, I'm so embarrassed to ask this. My license renewal came up, and with the market being slow, we're a little short. Could you help me out? $15,000 should cover it and give me a cushion for the continuing education requirements. I knew what real estate license renewal cost in Arizona. I'd looked it up the year before when Kristen first mentioned she was thinking about getting licensed. $400, maybe $600 if you included the background check and all the fees. I wrote the check anyway. $15,000, added to the $150 I'd already given her. Watched her face when I handed it over. Watched the relief that had nothing to do with professional licensing. The ledger in my workbench grew another entry. By month 9, the direct deposit arrangement for my pension had been modified. Kristen presented it as a convenience. The bank changed their online system, Dad. Your pension keeps bouncing back. If we route it through the joint account, I can make sure it goes through smoothly every month. I signed the forms because I wanted to see how far she'd go, because I was still gathering evidence, because part of me still believed there might be an explanation that didn't require my daughter to be a criminal. The pension started flowing into an account Kristen controlled completely. $60,000 a year that I saw only in statement form after she'd already made her withdrawals. When I questioned the $8,200 in mortgage arrears that had accumulated despite my contributions, her warmth evaporated. You're living in my house, Dad. The least you can do is contribute. Her house. The house I'd paid $150,000 to save from foreclosure. The house where I slept on a camp bed in a converted garage. I let the comment pass. Added it to the file. Derek's financial situation revealed itself in fragments over the following months. He forgot to mute his phone during a video call one afternoon. I heard his broker's voice through my garage window. Mr. Webb, the margin call stands. You have until Friday to cover the position, or we liquidate your holdings. I researched TD Ameritrade's margin requirements that night on my limited data plan, cross-referenced with the cash advance fees appearing on the credit card statements Kristen left on the kitchen counter. Day trading, leveraged positions, money borrowed at 23% interest to fund bets on stocks Derek didn't understand. The losses exceeded $200,000 by my calculations, probably more. I only saw what they left visible. 3 maxed credit cards. A second mortgage on the McMansion that Kristen never mentioned. The Scottsdale listing that sat unsold for 9 months while carrying costs devoured their cash flow. I understood the desperation now. I just didn't excuse it. Terrence Odom became my first outside witness, though he didn't know it yet. The retired mail carrier spent his mornings in his vegetable garden, which gave him a view into the Webb's kitchen window and side yard. 32 years of delivering mail had made him an involuntary observer of other people's business. I saw him watching one morning, the day after Kristen staged a particularly elaborate confusion incident involving a conversation I'd supposedly had about selling Janet's ring. I hadn't had any such conversation. Janet's ring hung against my chest, hidden where Kristen had never thought to look. Terrence's expression as he watched through the kitchen window wasn't sympathetic anymore. It was suspicious. The next time I walked past his property, he called out from the garden, "Chester, got a minute?" I walked over to the fence. Terence set down his trowel and lowered his voice. The smell of tomato plants hung between us. "None of my business," he said, "but I've been a mailman for a long time. You get a sense for when something's off in a house." I waited. "Your daughter, the way she talks about you when you're not around, the way she talks to you when you are," he shook his head, "reminds me of cases I used to see. Elderly residents whose mail would start disappearing, whose behavior their families started questioning." I nodded slowly. "What would you do if you were me?" Terence met my eyes. "Document everything. Find a lawyer who specializes in this kind of thing. And don't trust anyone in that house." He went back to his tomatoes. I went back to my garage. But I had a witness now. Someone outside the family who'd seen what Kristen was doing. Derek's carelessness revealed Dr. Mitchell Weston. He left his laptop open on the kitchen counter during one of his gym sessions. I walked through to fill my water bottle and saw the browser tab. Read it. A thread titled "Difficult Family Situations, Asset Protection Strategies." I read as much as I could in the 3 minutes before the laptop screen dimmed. Enough to understand. Users discussed finding sympathetic medical professionals who understood the complexities of managing elderly relatives' affairs. One name kept appearing in the Arizona-specific comments. Weston, private practice, cash preferred. I memorized the name and returned to my garage. The name matched what I'd overheard through the kitchen wall. That night, I heard Kristen and Derek confirming their plan. 11 for 11 on competency rulings, Derek said. "Found our guy. 5,000 is steep," Kristen answered. "But if it gets us the conservatorship, it gets us everything. The pension, the inheritance, complete control." I lay on my camp bed in the darkness, the weight of Janet's ring pressing against my ribs. 3 decades of catching fraudsters. Families who believed love justified theft. Who convinced themselves that desperation exempted them from the rules everyone else had to follow. I'd watched them in deposition rooms, testified against them in courtrooms, helped send them to prison while they wept about how unfair it all was. And now my own daughter was building a case to have me declared incompetent. Warehousing me in a facility while she liquidated everything I'd worked for, everything Leland had left me, everything Janet and I had built together. I got out of bed and walked to my workbench. The puzzle box sat there, 17 moves complete, one more mechanism to install. A compartment sized for a micro SD card. A solution coded to dates only I would know. Janet's birthday, our anniversary, Leland's middle name. I picked up the brass fitting I'd been shaping and examined it in the dim light. The work was good. Janet would have approved. My daughter had made her choice. She'd spent 18 months building her case, staging incidents, extracting money, preparing the ground for a corrupt psychiatrist to declare me unfit to manage my own affairs. She thought I was a confused old man whose grief had clouded his judgment, who couldn't see what was happening right in front of his face. who would shuffle quietly into a memory care facility while she spent his brother's apology on paying down her husband's gambling debts. She'd forgotten what I did for a living. I set down the brass fitting and pulled out my hidden notebook. Pages of dates, amounts, observations, 18 months of evidence, organized with an investigator's precision. Tomorrow I would call Sandra Vance. Tonight I would finish the puzzle box. The mechanism clicked into place, smooth and sure, and I tested the sequence one more time. Turn Bay, 18 moves. Janet's birthday, hour, anniversary, Leland's middle name. The hidden compartment opened, waiting for the evidence I would gather. My daughter thought I was already beaten. She'd miscalculated. I'd been waiting for this. The morning after overhearing the conspiracy, I waited for the house to empty. Kristen left at 9:15 for a showing in Paradise Valley. Her car pulled out of the driveway, tires crunching on gravel, and I watched through my garage window until the sedan disappeared around the corner. Derek followed 20 minutes later, gym bag over his shoulder, earbuds already in place. His truck rumbled past my window without a glance in my direction. I gave it another 15 minutes. Counted seconds on my watch. Let the silence settle. Then I walked into the main house. The kitchen still smelled like the coffee Derek had left burning in the pot. I crossed through to the hallway, my rubber-soled shoes silent on the tile. The door to Kristen's home office stood half open, morning light cutting across her desk. I opened the drawer without looking, fingers finding the folder section by section. 3 decades of muscle memory. The Manila folder sat in the front section, filed upright between utility bills and real estate contracts. My daughter had labeled it Callahan, Morris, Cognitive Assessment, using my mother's maiden name as cover, as if that would disguise anything. I pulled the folder and sat in her chair. The contents arranged themselves into a case file I'd seen 100 times before. Highlighted sections from a legitimate cognitive screening I'd taken 2 years ago for my driver's license renewal. Questions circled in red ink. A photocopy of the results with handwritten annotations in the margins shows decline. And reference this section. I turned to the next page. Sticky notes covered a printout from a psychiatric practice website. Dr. Weston, 5K, file by March 15. The date was circled 3 times. Today was March 4th. Bird E, 11 days. My hands remained steady. I'd spent 3 decades reviewing evidence that destroyed families. This was different only because the family being destroyed was mine. The draft power of attorney form stopped me. My signature appeared at the bottom. The loops and angles were almost right. Someone had practiced, probably traced from my Christmas card or one of the checks I'd written over the past 15 months. But the baseline slanted wrong. The pressure marks told the story of hesitation, of someone copying rather than signing. I photographed every page with my phone. The camera shutter sounded loud in the empty house. The timeline came next. A single sheet of paper with dates and action items in Kristen's handwriting. March 8, Weston evaluation scheduled. March 12, file guardianship petition. March 15, emergency hearing. Judge Morales's docket. April 4th, conservatorship approved. Transfer assets to protected account. April 15, move dad to facility. I read the last item twice. A handwritten note at the bottom of the page in Kristen's looping script, once conservatorship approved, pension 60 kecker, fresh inheritance, 12 meets, full control. Dad goes to memory care facility, Sunset Pines has availability, monthly cost covered by his assets. My daughter had already selected the facility where she planned to warehouse me. I photographed the timeline, photographed the note, photographed every sticky reminder and circled date in the folder. Then I returned everything exactly as I'd found it. Folder in the front section. Drawer closed. Chair pushed back to its original position. The kitchen clock showed 10:47. I had time, but I didn't leave immediately. I stood in my daughter's office and looked at the framed photos on her bookshelf. Kristen at her college graduation, Janet and I beaming on either side of her. Kristen's wedding day, Derek grinning in his rented tuxedo. A family portrait from 5 Christmases ago when Janet was already sick, but we didn't know it yet. In every photo, my daughter smiled. Wide and warm and convincing. The same smile she used when she moved my glasses, when she asked what day it was in front of the neighbors, when she delivered my meals on plastic trays and promised this was all temporary. I walked back to my garage and locked the door behind me. That evening, Kristen hosted a dinner party. I found out when the first car pulled into the driveway at 6:30. Then another, then 3 more. Voices spilled through my garage window, the bright chatter of professional networking disguised as social connection. No one had mentioned the gathering to me, no invitation, no warning. I stayed in my garage as the noise level rose. Laughter from the living room. The clink of wine glasses. Derek's voice carrying above the rest, playing the charming host. At 8:15, my throat went dry. I needed water, and the small refrigerator in my garage held only leftover takeout from 2 days ago. I could have waited, should have waited, but part of me wanted to see what would happen. I opened the door to the kitchen and walked into a room full of strangers. 12 people clustered around the island and breakfast table. Plates of catered appetizers covered every surface. Wine bottles stood in various stages of emptiness. Kristen spotted me first. The professional hostess mask cracked. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. The corners of her mouth tightened even as she forced them upward. The shift took less than a second, but I'd spent 32 years reading faces across deposition tables. "Dad?" She crossed the room with arms outstretched, voice pitched loud enough for everyone to hear. "What are you doing up? You know you get confused after dark." Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips. I stood in the doorway and read the scene. Name tags on lapels. Real estate company logos. Kristen's colleagues and potential clients gathered for an evening of relationship building. She'd assembled her witness list. Kristen reached me and took my arm, gentle but firm. The grip of someone managing an invalid. "I'm so sorry, everyone." She addressed the room with a practiced sigh. My father lives with us now. He has these episodes sometimes, just wanders around, can't remember where he is. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the guests. Knowing looks exchanged. Poor Kristen, dealing with her declining parent. I came for water, I said. Kristen's smile tightened. Of course you did, Dad. Let me get that for you. I can get my own water. I walked to the kitchen cabinet, took down a glass, filled it from the tap. The room stayed silent. I could feel them watching, cataloging details for the story they'd tell later. I turned and surveyed the guests. Name tags. I read each one as my gaze swept the room. Angela Chen from Coldwell Banker. Marcus Williams, Mortgage Brokerage. Jennifer Torres, Title Company. Robert Kim, Home Inspection Services. I pointed to each person as I named them. And at the table, David Martinez, Appraiser. Susan Lee, Escrow Officer. I took a sip of water. Did I miss anyone? The silence stretched. Kristen's face had gone pale. See what I mean? Her voice wobbled. He gets these moments of clarity, but then she trailed off, leaving the implication hanging. The guests looked at each other, uncertain now. The narrative she'd prepared wasn't matching what they were seeing. Angela Chen studied me with unexpected sharpness. Her eyes moved from my face to Kristen's and back again. Her brow furrowed slightly, and she tilted her head the way I'd seen witnesses do when testimony didn't add up. Derek appeared at my elbow, all false warmth and gentle handling. Let's get you settled, Pops. Don't want to tire yourself out. His hand closed on my arm. Not quite a grip. Not quite a guide. The pressure of a man who wanted control but knew he couldn't force it. I looked at him. I'm not tired. Dad, please, Kristen's voice cracked. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I held Derek's gaze until he released my arm. Then I nodded to the room, polite, measured, the way I'd concluded 1,000 depositions. Enjoy your evening. I walked back to my garage with my glass of water, closed the door, sat on my camp bed. The party noise resumed within minutes, louder now, Kristen working to rebuild the atmosphere I'd disrupted. But the damage was done. At least one person in that room, Angela Chen, with her sharp eyes and furrowed brow, had seen something that didn't fit the story my daughter was selling. I finished my water and waited for the house to empty. The voices faded after 11. Car engines started and departed one by one. Kristen and Derek's bedroom light went on, then off, but I heard them in the kitchen first. The wall between my garage and their cooking space was thin. Drywall and insulation, nothing more. I'd been overhearing fragments for 15 months. Tonight I stood at the wall, my ear 6 inches from the surface, and listened. Handled it. Derek's voice defensive. Handled it? Kristen's pitch rose. He named every person in the room. From their name tags, Derek. In order. So he's not as far gone as we thought. We adjust. Adjust how? Weston's evaluation is based on the incidents we've documented. If Dad starts pulling stunts like that in front of a judge, he won't. Derek's voice dropped. We move up the timeline. Get the petition filed before he can prepare. A pause. Ice clinked in a glass. The inheritance complicated everything, Kristen said. We were supposed to have months. Now it's 12 million sitting there, and every day we wait is another day he might do something stupid. Like what? Like hire a lawyer. Like move the money offshore. Like tell someone what we're planning. Derek laughed, short and nervous. Who's he going to tell? We've cut off his phone. His car's gone. The mail goes through us. He's isolated, babe. That was the whole point. Tonight didn't look isolated. Tonight looked like a man who knows exactly what's happening to him. Silence stretched. I heard Derek set down his glass. What are you saying? I'm saying we file the petition this week. Prize. Emergency basis. Dad's mentally unstable. A danger to himself. Needs immediate intervention. Weston hasn't done the evaluation yet. Then we pay him extra to expedite. Cash. Whatever it takes. Derek's voice shifted. The trading losses. I need that money now, Chris. Not in 6 months. Now. I know, the margin calls. I know. Another pause. Then Kristen's voice, cold and flat. 32 years he spent catching fraudsters, and he never saw this coming. That's the saddest part. He actually thinks I love him. Derek's laugh echoed through the wall. He won't even know what hit him. I stood in the darkness of my garage. Janet's ring pressed cold against my chest. The puzzle box sat on my workbench, mechanism complete, hidden compartment, waiting. I walked to the window and looked at nothing. My hands found the ring through my shirt, and I held it for a long moment. Then I let go. That's the saddest part. He actually thinks I love him. She didn't love me. Maybe she never had. Or maybe whatever love existed had been buried under Derek's debts and her fear of becoming Janet, a woman who gave everything and died with nothing. It didn't matter anymore. The reason didn't change the reality. My daughter was going to file an emergency petition to have me declared incompetent. She was going to use a corrupt psychiatrist's fraudulent evaluation. She was going to take my pension, my brother's inheritance, and my freedom. And she was going to warehouse me in a memory care facility while she watched everything I'd built disappear into her husband's gambling losses. I walked to my workbench. The nautical puzzle box gleamed in the moonlight from the window. Brass fittings, hidden compartment. 18 moves to open, coded to dates only I would know. Janet's birthday, March 3rd, 1962. Our anniversary, June 17th, 1993. Leland's middle name, Francis. I ran my fingers along the smooth wood. Janet would have loved this one. The mechanism was my best work. The joints invisible, the compartment undetectable, unless you knew exactly where to look. Kristen had searched my garage 3 months ago. Looking for the inheritance documents, probably. Looking for anything she could use. She dismissed the puzzle box as Dad's little craft project. She had no idea what I could hide inside. I pulled out my phone, started to dial Sandra Vance's number, then stopped. An email would create a paper trail. Sandra, I need your help. My daughter is planning to have me declared incompetent and file for conservatorship. I have evidence, documents, recordings, witnesses. They're filing an emergency petition this week. Please call me at this number tomorrow morning. I added the number for the prepaid phone I'd purchased 3 weeks ago. The one Kristen didn't know existed. The one Derek's cell plan modifications couldn't touch. Then I hit send. The response came in 47 seconds. Sandra always was a night owl. Chester. Jesus. I'll clear my morning. Office at 8. Bring everything you have. I looked at the puzzle box one more time. Tomorrow I would meet with Sandra. Tomorrow I would begin the counterattack. Tomorrow I would become the investigator again. But tonight I had work to finish. I opened my hidden notebook and added the final entries. The overheard conversation, word for word. The date, the time, Derek's nervous laugh, Kristen's cold assessment of my intelligence. He actually thinks I love him. I wrote it down because evidence required documentation, because the habits of 32 years demanded precision, because the only way to survive what was coming was to approach it like every other case I'd ever built. The clock showed 2:47 when I finished. I tucked the notebook into its hiding place among the sandpaper and wood shavings. I downloaded the photographs from the Manila folder to the micro SD card. I placed the card in the puzzle box compartment and sealed it closed. 18 moves to open. Janet's birthday. Our anniversary. Leland's middle name. Secrets hidden in wood and brass, coded to dates that only I would know. My daughter thought I was already defeated, confused, isolated, broken by grief and age. She'd forgotten what I spent my life doing. I lay down on my camp bed and closed my eyes. In 11 days, Kristen planned to file her petition. I would be ready. Sandra Vance's office sat on the 3rd floor of the Camelback Professional Building, a modest 2-room suite where filing cabinets lined one wall with labels yellowed from 15 years of Arizona sun. The coffee pot in the corner had burned down to sludge. I'd been here dozens of times over 15 years, always as the expert, the consultant, the man with the evidence. This morning, I walked through the back stairwell entrance as the victim. Sandra opened the door before I could knock. 54 years old, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a no-nonsense clip, reading glasses perched on her forehead. She'd prosecuted elder abuse cases for the state before switching to private practice. We'd worked 37 fraud cases together. Her jaw was set. Her eyes moved to my briefcase, then back to my face. Chester, she stepped aside. Get in here. I set my briefcase on her conference table, next to stacks of files and a whiteboard covered in color-coded case notes. The familiar disorder of an active investigation. I'd spent 3 decades surrounded by exactly this kind of organized chaos. Sandra closed the door and crossed her arms. Tell me everything. I opened the briefcase and pulled out the photographs. The Manila folder, the timeline, the handwritten note about Sunset Pines. I laid each item on the table without comment, letting the evidence speak the way I'd taught junior investigators to do. Sandra put on her reading glasses and picked up the first photograph. Her jaw tightened as she read. Callahan Morris, she said. Your mother's maiden name. Thin cover. She didn't expect anyone to look. Sandra moved through the photographs methodically. The highlighted cognitive screening from a physical my doctor had ordered 18 months ago. The sticky notes about Dr. Weston, the forged power of attorney, the timeline with its circled dates and action items. She stopped at the handwritten note. Dad goes to memory care facility. Sunset Pines has availability. Sandra set down the photograph. She's already picked out your prison. Monthly cost covered by his assets. I quoted from memory. She's budgeted my own money for the warehousing. Sandra removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. How long has this been going on? 18 months of groundwork. Isolation, financial extraction, staged incidents to build a pattern of supposed decline. I pulled out my hidden notebook. I've documented everything. Dates, amounts, witnesses. She took the notebook and began flipping through pages. Her expression hardened with each entry. 67,000 extracted through manufactured consent, she read. Direct deposit rerouted to joint account she controls. Car disposed of without documentation. Mail intercept confirmed. Derek's day trading losses are driving the timeline, I said. 217,000 in the hole. Margin calls coming due. They need my pension now, not later. The inheritance accelerated everything. Sandra looked up. Chester, this is textbook section 46456. Elder financial exploitation. Class 2 felony for amounts. Over 25,000. She tapped the notebook. Your daughter is looking at 4 to 10 years. 4 to 10 years. My daughter, the girl who'd asked me to check under her bed for monsters. I heard the words. My hands stayed steady on the armrests. There's more, I said. The psychiatrist they're using? Dr. Mitchell Weston. Derek found him through a Reddit thread about asset protection strategies. Sandra's eyes narrowed. Weston. Why does that name sound familiar? Because you've probably seen it before. 11 for 11 on competency rulings. That's what Derek said. 11 previous cases, all resulting in conservatorship appointments. Sandra was already moving to her computer. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up court records and cross-referencing databases I'd helped her build over 15 years of collaboration. Mitchell Weston, M.D., she read from the screen. Psychiatric practice on East Shea Boulevard. Bright, licensed 1992. No disciplinary actions on file. Keep looking, she typed another query. Scrolled. Her breath caught. Chester. I walked around the desk to look at her screen. Case numbers. Dates. Names I didn't recognize. 11 guardianship cases in the last 6 years, Sandra said, all involving elderly respondents, all evaluated by Weston, all resulting in conservatorship appointments. She clicked on the first case, then the second, then the third. The evaluation language is identical. Moderate cognitive impairment consistent with early-stage dementia. Diminished capacity for financial decision-making. Disorientation and memory gaps. Sandra looked at me. He's using a template. Same diagnosis, different name in the header. Cash payments, I said. No insurance billing. $5,000 per evaluation. How do you know that? I recorded him. Sandra went still. You recorded Dr. Weston. Arizona's a one-party consent state. I can legally record any conversation I participate in. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the Sony ITD UX570 digital recorder. I scheduled a preliminary consultation under pretense of concern about my own memory. Told him I'd been having episodes. Asked about his process. What did he say? I pressed play. Weston's voice filled the office, confident and practiced. My evaluation will note moderate cognitive impairment consistent with early-stage dementia. That's the language that gets conservatorships approved. The courts trust my assessments. I stopped the recording. Sandra stared at the device. He actually said that out loud. He's been doing this for years. Nobody fights back. The victims are too old, too isolated, too confused by the time they realize what's happening. Why would he be careful? She shook her head slowly. You're not his first victim, but you could be his last. I pulled out the second recording. I also captured Kristen and Derek discussing their timeline, and Kristen rehearsing her concerned daughter testimony. Play it. The kitchen conversation filled the room. Derek's nervous voice, Kristen's cold assessment, the words I'd memorized but still felt like blows. 32 years he spent catching fraudsters, and he never saw this coming. That's the saddest part. He actually thinks I love him. Derek's laugh. He won't even know what hit him. I stopped the recording. Sandra set down the photograph, removed her glasses, rubbed her eyes. Then she stood up and walked to her whiteboard, erasing the previous case notes with sharp strokes. Here's what we're going to do, she said. First priority, protect your assets. The inheritance needs to be untouchable before they file. She wrote irrevocable trust at the top of the board. I have a contact at First Western Trust Company. We can establish a trust structure that no conservatorship can reach. Professional trustee instead of family members. Distributions controlled solely by you while you maintain capacity. How fast? I can have the paperwork ready tomorrow. Transfer of assets within 48 hours. She added another item to the board, medical board complaint. Weston's pattern gives us leverage. I'll file a formal complaint documenting his fraudulent evaluations. Time it to coincide with your competency hearing so his credibility collapses in real time. What about the criminal referral? Sandra wrote county attorney referral beneath the other items. I'll prepare a package for the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Your recordings, the financial documentation, witness statements. They'll want to build their own case, but your evidence gives them a foundation. She stepped back from the board and looked at me. Chester, I need to ask you something. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we start, there's no stopping. Your daughter goes to prison. Your son-in-law probably takes a deal and testifies against her. I met her gaze. She's running a fraud scheme. She's planning to take everything I have and warehouse me in a facility. Nothing makes that acceptable. Sandra nodded slowly. I had to ask, what else do we need? She turned back to the board. Witnesses, the neighbor you mentioned, Terrence Odom. I'll need a formal statement from him about the staged incidents he observed. I can arrange that. Good. I'll also want character witnesses from your time at Southwestern Mutual. People who can testify to your cognitive sharpness, your professional competence. I'll give you a list. Sandra made another note on the board. The competency hearing itself. When they file the emergency petition, the court will appoint an investigator to interview you. That's standard procedure. But given Weston's pattern and your recordings, I can request an independent evaluation from a psychiatrist of our choosing. Someone honest, someone who doesn't have a financial incentive to find you incompetent. Sandra capped her marker. Chester, there's one more thing we need to discuss. I waited. Your recordings. The conversations you captured. They're legally admissible under Arizona's one-party consent law. But they're also devastating. When Kristen hears her own voice saying she doesn't love you, saying you won't know what hit you, Sandra paused. That's going to be played in open court, possibly broadcast on the news. Your daughter's words, your family's destruction made public. Protest, I know, do you? Because once that recording plays, there's no going back. No reconciliation, no pretending it didn't happen. Your relationship with your daughter ends in that courtroom. I thought about the girl who'd ask me to check under her bed, the teenager who'd cried on my shoulder, the woman who'd held Janet's hand in the hospital. That woman was gone. Maybe she'd never existed. Maybe the Kristen I remembered was a performance, just like the concerned daughter mask she wore for the neighbors. Proper, my relationship with my daughter ended 18 months ago, I said. I just didn't know it yet. Sandra held my gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. I'll have the trust documents ready tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I need you to preserve every piece of evidence you have. Upload everything to the secure cloud account my firm maintains. Automatic backup, timestamp verification, access logging. Even if they find and destroy your devices, the evidence survives. Already done, the original recordings. Micro SD card in a puzzle box I built. Hidden compartment. Requires a specific sequence to open. Coded to dates only I know. The corner of Sandra's mouth twitched. There he is. I stood and gathered my materials. What happens next? I file the trust paperwork today. Tomorrow we transfer assets. Meanwhile, I start building the medical board complaint and the criminal referral package. When Kristen files her emergency petition, we'll be ready. How long until she files? Sandra checked her notes. Based on the timeline you photographed, March 12th. 8 days from now. Weston's evaluation is March 8th. 4 days. Then we have 4 days to get everything in place. Sandra walked me to the door. Chester, one more thing. I paused. Don't confront them. Don't let them know you're aware. Every normal interaction you have between now and the hearing is evidence that contradicts their claim of cognitive decline. Understood? And Chester? Sandra's voice softened. Curse. I'm sorry about all of this. I opened the door to the back stairwell. So am I. That afternoon, I purchased a second Sony ITD UX570 recorder at a Best Buy in Chandler, 20 miles from Kristen's house. Paid cash. Kept the receipt in my wallet. I already owned a recorder, of course, the one I'd used on Weston and in my garage. But Sandra wanted a second device, backup documentation, belt and suspenders. The parking lot was half empty. I sat in the used Honda Civic I'd purchased 3 weeks ago. Another transaction Kristen didn't know about, funded from the bank account she couldn't see, and tested the new recorder's sensitivity. My voice came through clean and clear. The drive back took 45 minutes. I stopped at a coffee shop in Mesa, ordered a black coffee, and used their Wi-Fi to upload my recordings to Sandra's secure server. Timestamp verification confirmed. Chain of custody established. That evening, I knocked on Terrence Odom's door. The retired mail carrier answered in gardening clothes, dirt under his fingernails, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. Chester, his eyes moved past me to Kristen's house. Everything okay? Can we talk? Inside? Terrence stepped back and let me in. His living room was neat and sparse, the furniture worn but clean. A retired man's home, carefully maintained. The faint smell of fertilizer clung to his clothes. I sat on his couch and told him everything. Not the legal strategy, not the trust documents or the criminal referrals, just the facts. The forged power of attorney, the fraudulent psychiatrist, the timeline showing my daughter planned to have me declared incompetent and shipped to a memory care facility. Terrence listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. I knew something was wrong, he said, the way she'd laugh about it afterward. The way she'd tell you one thing and her husband another. That's not how you treat family. I need a witness, I said. Someone who saw the staged incidents from outside the house. Someone who can testify that my confusion was manufactured, not real. Terrence met my eyes. What do you need me to do? Write down everything you observed. Dates, times, specific incidents. My attorney will want a formal statement. I can do that. Thank you. Terrence shook his head. Don't thank me yet. What your daughter's doing, that's criminal. You understand that, right? She's going to prison. I know. And you're okay with that? I thought about the question for a long moment. The correct answer was yes. The legal answer was yes. The investigator's answer was yes. But the father's answer was more complicated. I spent 32 years watching families destroy themselves over money, I said. I saw children forge their parents' signatures. I saw spouses drain joint accounts. I saw loving families transform into predators the moment an inheritance was involved. I looked at the wall between Terrence's house and Kristen's, the wall I'd pressed my ear against while my daughter laughed about how easy I was to fool. I always wondered how those victims felt, I said. The elderly parents who realized their children saw them as obstacles. The widows who discovered their families were counting down the days until they died. I wondered if they fought back. If they could. Can you? I stood up. That's what I'm about to find out. Over the next 3 days, I built my case. Sandra completed the irrevocable trust paperwork. I signed at her office, transferred the inheritance, $12 million in mineral rights, property, and liquid assets into a structure my daughter could never touch. Professional trustee, sole beneficiary, Chester Fairbanks. Distributions controlled by my signature alone. The trust took effect 48 hours before Weston's scheduled evaluation. Sandra filed the medical board complaint on day 2. 11 previous cases documented. Pattern of fraudulent evaluations established. Investigation pending. The timing was strategic. The complaint would be public record by the time Kristen's petition reached the court. The criminal referral package went to the Maricopa County Attorney on day 3. My recordings, the financial documentation, Terrence's statement, Sandra's legal analysis, citing Section 46, 45, and outlining the scope of the conspiracy. I uploaded everything to the secure cloud server. Recordings, photographs, scanned documents, automatic backup, timestamp verification, access logging that proved when files were created and that they hadn't been modified. The original STI card went into my puzzle box. 18 moves to open. Janet's birthday, March 3, 1962. Our anniversary, June 17, 1993. Leland's middle name, Francis. Kristen had searched my garage 3 months ago. Dismissed the puzzle box as Dad's little craft project. She had no idea what was hidden inside. On the evening before Weston's evaluation, Sandra called. Everything's in place, she said. Trust is secure. Complaint is filed. Criminal referral is submitted. When Kristen files her petition, we'll be ready. What about the evaluation tomorrow? Go. Let Weston do his assessment. Don't confront him. Don't challenge his methodology. Don't give him any ammunition. Just answer his questions and let him write his fraudulent report. And then we let them file. We let them think they've won. And when we walk into that courtroom, we show them exactly what 32 years of fraud investigation looks like from the other side. I hung up and looked at the puzzle box on my workbench. Janet's ring hung cold against my chest. My daughter slept in the house next door, confident that her confused old father would never see the trap closing around him. She'd forgotten what I spent my life doing. Tomorrow I would sit in Dr. Weston's office and let him diagnose me with moderate cognitive impairment. I would answer his questions calmly, show no sign of awareness, give him nothing to suspect. And when the time came, when Kristen stood before Judge Morales and played her concerned daughter role, when Weston testified about my supposed decline, when Derek corroborated with his rehearsed sorrow, I would present the case of my career. The evidence was preserved. The allies were in place. The trap was set. My daughter had made her calculations. She'd miscounted. Maricopa County Family Court. Courtroom 4B. The same fluorescent lights I'd testified under 100 times now buzzed above me as I walked through the double doors, but this time I sat on the other side. The wooden benches I'd observed from the witness stand now stretched before me as the subject of a competency hearing. The bailiff who'd nodded at me for 15 years looked through me like I was a stranger. Sandra Vance walked beside me, her heels clicking on the tile floor. She carried a leather briefcase stuffed with documents I'd spent 2 weeks helping her organize. Evidence, recordings, the documentation of my daughter's fraud ready to be entered into the public record. Judge Patricia Morales sat at the bench, reviewing paperwork. 59 years old, former prosecutor, zero tolerance for exploitation of the elderly. I'd testified in her courtroom 8 times over the years. She'd never ruled against my findings. Today, I wasn't the expert. I was the respondent. Kristen arrived at 9:12, 3 minutes before the hearing was scheduled to begin. She wore a cream blazer over a navy dress, tissues visible in her pocket, costumed for the role she'd rehearsed. Her honey blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup understated and camera ready. The concerned daughter ready to perform. Derek hovered behind her, his nervousness visible in the way he kept adjusting his tie. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him clearly. The gambling losses were eating him from the inside. Dr. Mitchell Weston sat at the petitioner's table, reviewing his notes with the confidence of a man who'd done this 11 times before. His evaluation folder lay open in front of him. Moderate cognitive impairment consistent with early-stage dementia. The same language he'd used on 11 previous victims. I took my seat at the respondent's table and waited. Judge Morales looked up from her papers. This court is now in session. In the matter of the guardianship petition for Chester Fairbanks, case number 2024, GC00847. Counsel, please identify yourselves for the record. Kristen's attorney stood first. Marcus Webb, no relation to Derek. A real estate lawyer who'd pivoted to estate planning 3 years ago. He'd handled 4 guardianship cases, all uncontested. He had no idea what he'd walked into. Marcus Webb for the petitioner, Kristen Fairbanks Webb, Your Honor. Sandra Rose. Sandra Vance for the respondent, Chester Fairbanks. Judge Morales made a note. Mr. Webb, you may proceed with your opening statement. Webb buttoned his jacket and approached the bench. Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of family protection. Mr. Fairbanks is a 7858, I said. The word came out before I could stop it. Sandra's hand touched my arm. A warning. Webb paused, checked his notes. 58. My apologies. Mr. Fairbanks is a 58-year-old retired senior claims investigator who has shown significant cognitive decline over the past 18 months. His daughter, acting out of love and concern, seeks to protect him from his own diminished capacity. He continued for another 3 minutes. I stopped listening to the words and watched Kristen instead. She sat with her hands folded, eyes downcast, the picture of a daughter in distress. She dabbed at her eyes once with the tissues from her pocket. The dabbing was premature. Nothing had happened yet worth crying about. Webb finished his statement and returned to his seat. Sandra declined to give an opening, a tactical choice we'd discussed. Let them show their hand first. Let them commit to their lies before we dismantled them. The petitioner calls Dr. Mitchell Weston, Webb announced. Weston walked to the witness stand with the easy confidence of a man who'd never been challenged. He raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth, and settled into the chair like he owned it. Webb began his direct examination. Dr. Weston, please state your qualifications for the court. Weston recited his credentials. Board-certified psychiatrist. 32 years of practice. Specialization in geriatric cognitive assessment. His voice carried the practiced smoothness of a man who delivered this speech 100 times. And you conducted an evaluation of Mr. Fairbanks? I did, on March 8th of this year at my office. What were your findings? Weston opened his evaluation folder. Mr. Fairbanks displays moderate cognitive impairment consistent with early-stage dementia. During our session, he exhibited disorientation, memory gaps, and diminished capacity for financial decision-making. I kept my face neutral. The evaluation had lasted 47 minutes. Weston had asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens, to name the current president, to draw a clock showing 3:15. I'd answered every question correctly while he marked his predetermined diagnosis on his predetermined form. In your professional opinion, Webb continued, is Mr. Fairbanks capable of managing his own affairs? He is not. I recommend the appointment of a conservator to protect both his person and his estate. Webb nodded with satisfaction. Thank you, Dr. Weston. No further questions. Sandra rose slowly. She carried a single folder, thin compared to the stack Weston had brought. Dr. Weston, you mentioned this evaluation took place on March 8th. What time did Mr. Fairbanks arrive at your office? Weston checked his notes. 2:15 in the afternoon. And what time did he leave? Approximately 3 o'clock. 45 minutes. That's how long you spent with Mr. Fairbanks before concluding he has dementia? Webb stood. Objection. The witness's professional methodology is not on trial here. Sustained, Judge Morales said. Move on, Mrs. Vance. Sandra nodded. Dr. Weston, how many guardianship evaluations have you conducted in the past 6 years? I don't have an exact number. I do. Sandra opened her folder. 11 evaluations, all resulting in conservatorship appointments. Weston shifted in his seat. I evaluate patients referred to me by concerned family members. If my findings support conservatorship, that's a reflection of the patient's conditions, not my methodology. Let me read you something. Sandra pulled out a document. This is from your evaluation of Margaret Chen, conducted in 2019. Quote, Mr. Chen displays moderate cognitive impairment consistent with early-stage dementia. She set that document down and picked up another. This is from your evaluation of Robert Thompson, 2020. Quote, Mr. Thompson displays moderate cognitive impairment consistent with early-stage dementia. Another document, William Foster, 2021. Same language. Patricia Okonkwo, 2020. 2. Same language. David Nakamura, 2023. Same language. She spread the documents across the witness stand. 11 patients, 11 evaluations, identical diagnostic language in every single one. Would you care to explain that coincidence, Dr. Weston? Weston's confident expression cracked. Cognitive decline often presents in similar patterns. Does it? Or is this the language that gets conservatorships approved? The room went still. I recognized the phrase. My own recording, about to be played. Objection, Webb said. Counsel is badgering the witness. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce into evidence a recording made by my client during a preliminary consultation with Dr. Weston. Arizona is a one-party consent state, and Mr. Fairbanks was a participant in this conversation. During this consultation, my client asked Dr. Weston about his evaluation process. Judge Morales leaned forward. I'll allow it. Sandra pressed play on her phone. Weston's voice filled the courtroom, confident and transactional. My evaluation will note moderate cognitive impairment consistent with early-stage dementia. That's the language that gets conservatorships approved. The courts trust my assessments. The recording ended. Silence. Weston's face had gone gray. His attorney, sitting in the gallery, was already texting. Dr. Weston, Sandra said, how much were you paid for this evaluation? I don't see how that's relevant. $5,000. Cash. No insurance billing. Sandra turned to Judge Morales. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a formal complaint filed this morning with the Arizona Medical Board regarding Dr. Mitchell Weston's pattern of fraudulent evaluations. Webb shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is a guardianship hearing, not a medical board proceeding. It's a hearing about my client's competency, Sandra replied. The credibility of the expert witness making that determination is directly relevant. Dr. Weston has conducted 11 evaluations, resulting in conservatorships, using identical language, accepting cash payments, and 3 of those wards died within 18 months under circumstances that are now being reinvestigated. The gallery stirred. Kristen's face had lost its composed expression. Judge Morales studied the documents Sandra had presented. Dr. Weston, you may step down. This court will take a 15-minute recess while I review these materials. The bailiff called the recess. Weston walked back to his seat, his confidence shattered. He pulled out his phone and began typing. Sandra leaned close to me. Stage 1 complete. When we reconvene, Kristen takes the stand. I nodded. My hands were steady. My pulse was calm. 32 years of watching families destroy themselves in courtrooms. I never thought I'd be sitting at this table. The recess ended. Judge Morales returned to the bench with a folder of her own. Before we proceed, the court notes that the complaint against Dr. Weston raises substantial questions about the reliability of his evaluation. The petitioner may wish to consider whether to continue with this witness's testimony. Webb huddled with Kristen. A whispered argument. Kristen's expression hardened. Your Honor, the petitioner calls Kristen Fairbanks Webb. My daughter walked to the witness stand. She raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth. The tears came on cue as Webb began his questions. Mrs. Webb, can you describe your father's condition over the past 18 months? Kristen dabbed her eyes with the tissues. It's been devastating to watch. My father was such a sharp man. Brilliant investigator. But after my mother died, she paused, composing herself. He started forgetting things. Little things at first, then bigger things. Can you give the court some examples? He wanders at night, gets confused about what day it is. I found him once trying to start a car we sold 3 years ago. The tears flowed more freely now. I don't want control of his money. I want to protect him. That's what family does. Webb nodded sympathetically. No further questions. Sandra rose. Mrs. Webb, you mentioned your father forgets what day it is. Can you describe a specific incident? Kristen wiped her eyes. There have been so many. Just last month, I asked him what day it was, and he said Thursday when it was Wednesday. Was anyone else present during this exchange? Patricia Hendricks. She's on our HOA board. And what did you say to Mrs. Hendricks after your father left the room? Kristen's expression flickered. I don't remember exactly. Sandra picked up her phone. Perhaps this will refresh your memory. The recording played. Kristen's voice, laughing. See how confused he is? I asked him the same question this morning, and he said Wednesday. Now he says Thursday. He can't keep anything straight. The recording continued. Derek's voice. The neighbor noticed, right? Patricia was watching the whole time. Another witness for the file. Sandra stopped the recording. For the file, Mrs. Webb? Kristen's face had gone pale. The tears had stopped. You were building a case, Sandra continued. Staging incidents in front of witnesses, creating documentation of supposed decline that didn't exist. That's not true, Your Honor. I'd like to call Chester Fairbanks to the stand. Judge Morales nodded. I rose and walked to the witness stand. 32 years of testimony. And this was the only time that mattered. I raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth. Sandra began simply. Mr. Fairbanks, please state your name and occupation. Chester Fairbanks, retired senior claims investigator for Southwestern Mutual Insurance. 32 years specializing in elder financial exploitation cases. And can you tell the court about your cognitive state? My cognitive state is fine. I completed a full medical evaluation 3 months ago for my driver's license renewal. Perfect scores on all cognitive assessments. I can provide the documentation. Sandra handed a folder to the bailiff. Exhibit D, Your Honor. Mr. Fairbanks's medical records. Mr. Fairbanks, Sandra continued, are you married? I was. My wife Janet died 2 years ago. Ovarian cancer. Do you remember your wedding vows? The question caught me off guard. Then I understood. I, Chester, take you, Janet, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. The words came without effort. 31 years of marriage. Every syllable burned into my memory. And what is the date of your wife's death? March 17th, 2024, 3:17 in the afternoon. I was holding her hand. Sandra turned to the judge. Your Honor, the petitioner's expert testified that Mr. Fairbanks displays memory gaps and disorientation. Does this sound like a man with moderate cognitive impairment? Judge Morales made a note. Mr. Fairbanks, Sandra said, please describe for the court what you discovered in your daughter's home office on February 22nd of this year. I walked them through it. The Manila folder, the forged power of attorney, the timeline showing the guardianship petition, the conservatorship approval, the memory care facility with availability. I identified each exhibit by number without notes. I quoted the documents verbatim. Once conservatorship approved, pension $60,000 per year, plus inheritance $12 million, equals full control. Dad goes to memory care facility. Sunset Pines has availability. I looked at Kristen as I said the last words. Her face had gone white. Mr. Fairbanks, did you record any conversations relevant to this case? I did. Arizona's one-party consent law permits recording conversations I participate in. Sandra played the final recording. Kristen's voice, Derek's laugh. 32 years he spent catching fraudsters, and he never saw this coming. That's the saddest part. He actually thinks I love him. He won't even know what hit him. The recording ended. The courtroom was silent. Mr. Fairbanks, Sandra said, do you have anything else to add? I looked at my daughter. The girl who'd asked me to check under her bed. The woman who'd planned to warehouse me in a facility while she spent my brother's apology. My daughter said I spent 32 years catching fraudsters and never saw this coming. She was half right. I paused. I didn't see it coming, but I see it now. Sandra turned to the bench. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Morales reviewed her notes. The silence stretched. This court finds the guardianship petition to be without merit, she said. The evidence presented demonstrates a pattern of manufactured incidents, financial exploitation, and fraudulent medical evaluation. The petition is dismissed. She paused, letting that settle. Furthermore, this court orders an immediate investigation into Dr. Mitchell Weston's practice, with a recommendation for criminal referral to the county attorney's office. The court also issues a protective order barring Kristen Fairbanks Webb and Derek Webb from any contact with Chester Fairbanks's finances. Judge Morales set down her papers. This hearing is adjourned. The bailiff called the room to order. People began gathering their things. I stood slowly. My legs felt strange beneath me. The weight of what had just happened settled across my shoulders. 32 years of catching fraudsters. And now I'd caught my own daughter. I walked toward the exit. Sandra fell into step beside me. She said nothing, just walked beside me. Kristen caught my arm as I passed the petitioner's table. Her grip was tight, her eyes were wet, but the tears looked different now. Real. Dad, I can explain. I removed her hand. The motion was gentle. The finality was not. 32 years I spent watching families tear themselves apart over money. I never thought. I stopped. Started to say something else. I suppose that's the thing about blind spots. By definition, you can't see them coming. I met her eyes, held them, But I see you now, Kristen. Clearly. I walked out of the courtroom. Sandra's heels clicked beside me. The wooden doors swung closed behind us. My daughter stood in the wreckage of her own creation. I kept walking. My shoes were silent on the marble. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside alone. The weeks following the hearing brought thorough destruction to everyone who conspired against me. The machinery of justice, once set in motion, proved as effective as the scheme it dismantled. I moved into a hotel the day after the hearing, March 16th. Extended stay in North Phoenix, nothing fancy, clean sheets, quiet neighbors, a kitchenette where I could make coffee strong enough to strip paint. The distance from Kristen's house felt necessary, not just legally, but emotionally. Sandra called on the third day with the first update. Weston's license is suspended, she said, effective immediately. The medical board moved faster than I've ever seen them move. I sat on the hotel bed, phone pressed to my ear. The complaint worked. The recordings worked. When the board heard him discussing his evaluation methodology, they didn't need much convincing. But that's just the beginning. She outlined the cascade. The 11 families whose relatives had been placed in conservatorships under Weston's fraudulent evaluations were being contacted. 3 attorneys had already reached out to Sandra's office, asking for copies of the complaint documentation. A class action was forming. There's something else, Sandra said. 3 of those 11 cases involved wards who died within 18 months of the conservatorship being established. Adult Protective Services is reopening each investigation. I thought about those 3 people. Names I didn't know. Faces I'd never seen. People who'd been declared incompetent by a man who sold diagnoses for cash, then died in facilities where no one was watching. Keep me informed, I said. A month later, Weston was arrested. I watched the news coverage from my hotel room. Local affiliate, 6 o'clock broadcast. Weston's face filling the screen as he was led from his office in handcuffs. The reporter's voice described the charges: fraud, conspiracy, practicing medicine under false pretenses. The camera caught his expression as the patrol car door closed. The confidence was gone. The smooth, professional manner that had convinced 11 families to trust him with their relatives' futures had collapsed into something smaller. Defeated, his bail was set at $500,000. His assets were frozen pending the outcome of the civil suits. The reporter mentioned gambling debts that had surfaced during the investigation. Hundreds of thousands owed to casinos across Nevada. The desperation that had driven his side business exposed for the courts to examine. Heard, I turned off the television and sat in silence. Weston would face 15 to 25 years if convicted. The prosecutor's office was already negotiating with his attorney, seeking cooperation in identifying the network of lawyers and family members who had referred clients to him over the years. I thought about the moment in his office when he'd explained his methodology, the casual way he'd described the language that gets conservatorships approved, the certainty that no one would ever challenge him. He'd been right about that for years. 11 victims, who never fought back. To me. Derek's collapse came next. The criminal investigation into my daughter's finances exposed what Derek had hidden from everyone, including Kristen. The day trading losses, the margin calls, the cash advances from 3 credit cards that funded his gambling on stocks he didn't understand. $217,000. Gone. Evaporated into the algorithms of a market that rewarded patience and punished desperation. Sandra delivered the news during our weekly meeting at her office. The federal prosecutor is charging him with wire fraud related to the credit card manipulation, she said. The state charges are conspiracy to commit elder financial exploitation. He's looking at significant time. How much? 8 to 12 years if it goes to trial. His attorney is negotiating. I looked at the whiteboard in Sandra's office where she'd mapped out the case against my daughter and her husband. Color-coded timelines. Financial flows. Witness lists. The architecture of their scheme, diagrammed like an engineering blueprint. He'll cooperate, I said. Sandra nodded. That's what I'm hearing. His attorney has already signaled that Derek will testify against Kristen in exchange for a reduced sentence. Derek, who had found Dr. Weston through a Reddit thread. Derek, who had laughed when Kristen said, "I wouldn't know what hit me." Derek, who had married my daughter and helped her plan my destruction. Now he would help destroy her in return. When? The plea agreement should be finalized within the week. He'll receive 3 years, serve 18 months with good behavior. 3 years. 18 months. My son-in-law would be free before my daughter saw the outside of a courtroom. The marriage ended via text message. I learned this from Sandra, who learned it from the prosecutor's office, who learned it from Derek's attorney. Kristen received the plea agreement documentation before she knew Derek was cooperating. He'd sent it directly to her phone with no explanation. No warning, no goodbye. I imagined her reading those pages, the clinical legal language describing how her husband would testify against her. The details of their planning sessions, the recordings he'd helped me capture without knowing what they would cost him. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindication. I felt tired. Kristen's destruction was complete. The Arizona Real Estate Commission suspended her license within days of the criminal charges being filed. Conspiracy to commit elder financial exploitation. Attempted theft of an amount exceeding $100,000. Forgery. The forged power of attorney. My signature, copied from a Christmas card, applied to a document that would have given her control of everything I owned. The suspension made local news. The real estate community's gossip network, which Kristen had cultivated so carefully over years of networking events and professional relationships, turned against her overnight. Every agent in Phoenix knew her name by the end of the week. Not as a successful colleague, as a warning. The McMansion went next. Without Derek's income, without my pension contributions, without the inheritance they'd planned to control, Kristen couldn't make the mortgage payments. 2 months behind when the hearing concluded. 3 months behind by the time Derek's plea agreement was finalized. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Tuesday in April. I know the date because Sandra told me. She'd been monitoring the public records, tracking the collapse of my daughter's life through the impersonal documentation of financial failure. The Scottsdale listing expired unsold. The statement jewelry was pawned. The designer clothes were sold through consignment shops that didn't ask questions about provenance. Kristen moved into a studio apartment in Mesa, working at a call center while awaiting trial. $53,000 a year reduced to $14 an hour, plus commissions she rarely earned. I saw her once. I was getting gas at a station near the freeway 3 months after the hearing. A habit from my investigation days. Pay attention to your surroundings. Note the faces. Watch for patterns. She was at the pump across from mine. Faded athletic wear instead of designer labels. Hair pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of professionally styled. Fingernails unpainted, chipped at the edges. She didn't see me, or if she did, she didn't recognize the man she'd planned to warehouse in a memory care facility. I watched her pump gas, watched her check her phone, watched her get back in a car I didn't recognize, something older and smaller than the luxury OV she'd driven before. The polished performance was gone. The concerned daughter mask, the real estate professional smile. Everything she'd constructed to present herself to the world had collapsed, and what remained was a woman I barely recognized. I didn't approach her, didn't speak, didn't make my presence known. I finished pumping my gas and drove away. The complicated grief came later. Sandra helped me process it during our final meeting before I left Phoenix. We sat in her office, the whiteboard now blank, the case files boxed and labeled for storage. "You're struggling," she said. It wasn't a question. I protected myself. I vindicated my competence. I preserved my brother's legacy. I looked at the empty whiteboard where she'd mapped my daughter's conspiracy. But I also destroyed her. Sandra leaned forward. "Chester, you didn't do this to her. She did this to herself. You just refused to be complicit in your own exploitation. She's my daughter. She tried to have you declared incompetent. She planned to take everything you had and put you in a facility while she spent it. She said, you didn't know she didn't love you." The words hit like they always did. The recording played in my memory whether I wanted it to or not. That's the saddest part. He actually thinks I love him. "I know what she did," I said. "I know what she planned. I documented every piece of it. I presented it in court. I watched her face when the judge dismissed her petition." Then what's the struggle? I thought about the question for a long time. Sandra waited. She'd spent 15 years working cases with me. She knew how I processed things. "I keep wondering when it started," I said. "The planning, the manipulation, the decision to see me as an asset instead of a father." Sandra shook her head. "That question doesn't have an answer you can live with. Whatever she tells herself about why she did it, it won't satisfy you. And whatever you imagine, it won't be the truth." "I know. Then let it go." I couldn't, not yet. Maybe not ever, but I could move forward anyway. I visited Janet's grave the next morning. The cemetery was still at 7 a.m., groundskeepers working in the distance, their equipment humming. The grass was damp with dew. Spring flowers had been planted along the main paths, colors I knew Janet would have loved. I sat on the bench near her headstone and told her everything. The conspiracy, the evidence, the hearing, the aftermath. I told her about Weston's arrest and Derek's cooperation and Kristen's collapse. I told her about the studio apartment in Mesa and the call center job and the gas station where I'd seen our daughter looking like a stranger. I told her I didn't know if she'd be proud of me or heartbroken about Kristen. Probably both, I decided. That's what I kept coming back to. She'd understand why I had to do it, and she'd grieve what it cost. The wind moved through the trees. Birds called somewhere in the distance. I left yellow roses on her grave, her favorite. Then I stood, touched the headstone one final time, and walked back to my car. The flight to Durango left at 2:15. Leland's cabin waited at the end of a gravel road, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the San Juan Mountains. The property management company had kept it maintained for 2 years, waiting for an owner who never came. Now, I was here. I walked through the rooms slowly. Leland's books still on the shelves. His geological surveys still in the workshop. Investment records filed in the home office documenting the mineral rights portfolio that now belonged to me. The wraparound deck looked out at mountains that didn't care about fraud or betrayal or family destruction. They'd been there for millions of years. They'd be there for millions more. Whatever happened in the valley below, they remained. I stood on that deck as the sun dropped behind the peaks. The light shifted from gold to orange to deep red, painting the snow-capped ridges in colors that had no names. The air turned cold. I didn't move. That night, I opened my puzzle box one final time. 18 moves. Janet's birthday. Our anniversary. Leland's middle name. The hidden compartment opened, and I removed the micro RDT card. The original recordings, the evidence that had dismantled my daughter's scheme and exposed a corrupt psychiatrist and triggered investigations across 11 families. I locked the card in the cabin's safe. The combination was my father's birthday. Another family secret. The evidence was preserved, but no longer needed. The criminal cases would proceed on their own momentum now. Prosecutors had copies of everything. Kristen would plead guilty. Her attorney had already signaled as much during pre-trial negotiations. 5 years. She'd served 2 with good behavior. I didn't know if I would see her again. Standing in my brother's cabin, surrounded by his books and his maps and the legacy he'd left me as an apology for 20 wasted years, I realized I didn't know if I wanted to. The mountains held their silence. I closed the safe and went to bed. If you felt that, smash like and rate my story from 1 to 10. I read every single comment. Thank you. 18 months after the hearing, I stood on the wraparound deck of Leland's cabin with black coffee that had been brewing since dawn. The San Juan Mountains held their positions against the morning sky. They'd been there before I arrived. They'd be there after I left. Snow still capped the highest ridges despite the spring thaw working its way up the slopes. I'd found a rhythm here. Mornings on the deck. Afternoons in the workshop Leland had converted from a storage shed. The smell of sawdust still clung to the rafters. Evenings, reading his collection of geological surveys, understanding for the first time what my brother had built during our 20 years of silence. The mineral rights deposited $400,000 annually, more than I'd made in my best year at Southwestern Mutual. Money that existed only because I'd refused to become a victim. 6 months after the hearing, we'd established the Janet Fairbanks Foundation for Elder Financial Protection. Sandra Vance agreed to run the Phoenix office, funded by a portion of Leland's legacy. Legal aid for seniors facing guardianship abuse. Investigative resources for families who suspected exploitation. The kind of support I'd needed and almost didn't find in time. The Weston investigation had generated referrals from 6 other states. Nevada alone had found 4 similar operations. Patterns emerging, corrupt evaluators identified. Families reconnecting with relatives who'd been declared incompetent by men and women who sold diagnoses for cash. I testified occasionally. Expert witness work, the same role I'd played for 32 years, but different now. The competency hearing transcript had become teaching material for elder law attorneys. Sandra used it in her continuing education seminars. I built puzzle boxes, 7 completed since I'd arrived in Colorado. Each one donated to a hospice in Durango where patients worked the mechanisms during treatment. Something beautiful to solve when sleep wouldn't come. The same purpose they'd served for Janet. I'd finally given one away. The 8th box sat on my workbench, half finished. The solution required 3 dates. Janet's birthday, March 3, 1962. Our anniversary, June 17, 1993. The day of the hearing, March 15, 2024. The mechanism was my best work. Hidden compartments within hidden compartments. A sequence that would take patience and attention to solve. The kind of puzzle Janet would have loved. I set down my coffee and walked to the deck railing. The mountains held their silence. A hawk circled above the tree line, riding thermals I couldn't see. Kristen had pleaded guilty. Her attorney had negotiated down from the statutory maximum. 5 years. She'd served 2 with good behavior. The terms were finalized while I was settling into the cabin, learning which floorboards creaked and where Leland had hidden his good bourbon. I didn't attend the sentencing. Sandra sent me the court documents. I read them once, filed them in the safe with the original recordings, and went back to my workshop. The question of whether I'd see my daughter again had stopped presenting itself. Not because I'd forgiven her, not because the anger had faded into something manageable, but because the answer wouldn't change anything. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. The foundation helped people now. The puzzle boxes brought comfort to dying strangers. The cabin held me in a silence that felt less like isolation and more like peace. I thought about others in my position. People watching their families position themselves. People who felt something was wrong but didn't trust the instinct. I'd documented everything. Found allies. Let them underestimate me until their underestimation became my advantage. 32 years of catching fraudsters. One of them was my daughter. The skills that build a life can also protect one. Age hadn't slowed my reflexes, just changed where I applied them. Seeing clearly had cost me a daughter. I'd made the trade anyway. The hawk dropped below the tree line. Still hunting. The coffee had gone cold in my hand. The mountains held their positions, patient and unchanging. I walked back inside to finish the puzzle box. The brass fittings caught the morning light. Janet would have approved.